There's a haunting scene in Nora Neale Hurston's important novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. One afternoon, the protagonist, Janie, sees Seminole Indians passing through the swamp heading east. The Seminole yell. They warn that a hurricane is coming and that people should evacuate to higher ground. But it's a nice day. It's a nice day. Well, nobody believes them. That night, in the wee hours of the morning, I guess, the Okeechobee hurricane struck, the great Okeechobee hurricane struck, killing 3,000 people in what remains one of the most devastating recorded natural disasters on record. Nobody believed them. The Seminole had read the tall grasses. They read the tall grasses in the swamps near Lake Okeechobee, where the lake opens up to that river of grass we call the Everglades. They observed that the seed pods had swollen and popped open, and they began to leave the area, moving to higher ground. The Seminole said, the tall grass had spoken. The tall grass had spoken. From generations of experience living in Florida, they had learned how their ecology behaved and how the flora responded to different weather patterns. They had learned. Their experience allowed them to know a hurricane was coming, and their experience with hurricanes had told them to get out of low ground, evacuate, get up to high ground, get to the hills. And Florida, looking for a hill is. This was 1928, before Doppler radar, before mathematical modeling. That's how we predict storms today. But they had no instruments, no computers. They did not have any of those things. Neither did anybody else. They had, however, indigenous wisdom. They had Seminole science. On the prairies, west of the Missouri River, the Caddo and Wichita people built very large houses, larger in some ways than this building, at least on the first level here. Low to the ground, seen from a distance, it might be taken for a mound. Some of these structures were big enough to host the whole village. The whole village. For dance ceremonies, games, which the community celebrated the sacred and enjoyed themselves in community. The grass houses were both breathable and waterproof. The Caddo and Wichita people had lived on the prairie for generations. They had experienced all kinds of weather in that open environment, and they knew about blizzards, snows, heavy snows, relentless sun in the summer. They knew the prairies could see tornadoes. These big houses stood up to those tornadoes. They resisted being crushed by snow. They had learned from their environment and built a sustainable relationship to it. They did not go to architectural schools. They learned from their elders. They had indigenous wisdom. Their wisdom informed them to let the building be part of the prairie, with the prairie, not against the prairie. They practiced Caddo and Wichita science. Now let us move further west. Few people know that what's called Phoenix today, Phoenix, Arizona, and its surrounding suburbs sits on one of the most extensive and sophisticated irrigation systems in the world. Sits on it. Now, we're not talking about the present water robbing system that has been set up on that desert in the last century. We're not talking about that one. No, I'm talking about the system that was built by the Hoboken people 2 centuries before the slave trader Columbus got lost in the Bahamas, where he and his crew were discovered by the Llanos. The Hoboken irrigation system was a major engineering feat. The ancient canal system dates from the 5th and 6th centuries, and according to our Christian calendar, which is hegemonic, it was the 14th century when it ceased. Thousands of miles of waterways were constructed, watering tens of thousands of acres of crops. Tens of thousands of acres of crops. Water was returned to the rivers throughout the project. The Hoboken people learned from their surroundings and built a viable technology that arose out of nature. And they continued building and building and building to the point that they were working against the river. And by the 12th century of the common area, they had overbuilt. Their complex was unsustainable, and the Hoboken civilization collapsed when it lost touch with its relationship, when it lost touch with who it was in an environment. They had become arrogant in their accomplishments. They began to ignore their own indigenous wisdom about returning the water, not overbuilding. The Hoboken people no longer exist as a people. They went the way of other urbanized cultures and peoples we see these ruined cities all over the world. Most of those ruined cities are because of environmental disasters that they invited upon themselves. They had ceased to listen to Mother Earth. They no longer lived within the limits imposed by the water from the Colorado River, by the desert. They forgot the practices that had given their culture life in the first place. For most of human history, human beings have lived on this planet and paid attention to the earth. They learned from the earth. They lived in a place, they provided for their needs. And by knowledge of that particular place, that particular environment, they learned to create sustainable relationships, sustainable economies. By living in harmony with Mother Earth, she revealed her secrets to them in that place, in that time, through practice. Let me repeat it in other words, words that might go down into a college course. Indigenous wisdom is particular to a location. It is the wisdom of people who have learned by experience to create a sustainable way of life. And the knowledge comes from practice over time. The ancient medical understanding of my ancestors, the Cherokee people, was based on observing. This herb does provide relief from poison ivy. That one doesn't. This one, but don't chew it or drink it in a tea. No, make a balm out of it. Make a lotion out of it. Rub it on the rash. Medicine women kept the knowledge and trained their daughters over thousands of years in the knowledge of how to use herbs. That body of knowledge grew over time. Over time. Most pharmacology today owes its formulas and potents to ancient herbalists. In every part of the world, indigenous herbalists created formulas from the local plants that worked. These treatments were often effective as those we know today. My mother used to tell me, aspirin, it comes from the trees, and we've been doing it for 10,000 years. Take aspirin. So there. Now we're coming to understand that the health of Native Americans before the European invasion was excellent. They did not suffer from diabetes, from cancer, from heart attacks. Their diets were mostly vegetables, beans, greens, squashes, and whole grains. And to get meat, there was lots of exercise involved. Hunting is a huge exercise. So they lived long lives. They didn't eat just one food. They had dozens of varieties of corn and other grains, dozens of varieties of legumes and fruits and greens. Today, our commercial agriculture has greatly reduced the choices. You go to fancy supermarkets sometimes, and you can't find anything but one particular species of, say, corn, the most plentiful grain grown in the Americas. And so unless you venture into Whole Foods and pay a premium or live near an organic farmer's market, the food is quite circumscribed. The variety is limited, and it does not provide human nutritional needs. American agriculture products are full of toxins. Our meats are full of antibiotics and growth hormones. But this isn't just about us. Just that our health is endangered by the system of agriculture we've developed. It's not just about us. The way we grow our food and how it's brought to us is destroying the soil and the water reserves and taking a huge amount of energy. Our food system is unsustainable. Unsustainable. Now, many Unitarian Universalists agree that there's a whole group of crises going on. Sometimes we can loop all those crises and call them environmental health crises. But we have been taught that these crises lie outside of us, out there. There's the crisis of the atmosphere, the crisis of the water table. There's all kinds of crises, but they're phenomena that could be studied without looking at human beings. Now, I'm inviting you to consider that the crisis is us. That we have lost touch with our life-sustaining environment. We've lost relationship to it. We've lost relationship to our world in which we live and move and have our being. We've lost that. And our way of life is profoundly alien to who we were evolved to be. Our culture is antagonistic and contrary to nature. At the same time, we're part of nature. We're part of nature, but we're created as contrary to nature. We have evolved as a species, among others, dependent and contingent upon them for survival. We've been taught to call this crisis of relationship by all kinds of names: global warming, climate change, water resource depletion, species extinction, expansion of the deserts, acidic buildup of our oceans, ozone layer destruction, acid rain, deforestation, soil erosion, water and atmosphere, pollution. And I think if we spent time at it, we could get more names for more crises that put it out there. And we have created a crisis of world hunger, commercialization of agriculture, a crisis of diet and health. Our media and our politicians treat all these critical problems in isolation. We're taught that these are discrete problems, all worthy of a separate department of a university, I guess. Discrete. Take this pill for your heart and spend lots of money on the technology to solve the climate problem. I'm inviting you to consider that our crisis is a profound spiritual malaise. We're not dealing with a series of isolated problems. The crises arise out of a profound brokenness, a profound alienation of who we are as human beings. We've forgotten We have forgotten that we belong to the earth. The earth does not belong to us. That we're creatures. We make these words of Noah Seath into an exotic saying, something for Native American Heritage Month. You know, we got to do something for the Heritage Month. We'll read Noah Seath. But we don't live by the words that we belong to the earth, because that would require a profound reorientation of our lives, our economy, our social practice. Our politics, our economy is all premised on the idea that the earth is a possession, is a thing. And it's our thing. It's our thing to manipulate and violate as we will. And if we believe our earth is a thing and it belongs to us, we might believe that the problem with our ecology is a technological one. That we can solve the problem with techniques. You know, windmills, hybrid cars, fluorescent light bulbs. Now, all good things. All good things. But they don't address the root problem. If we come to live in this simple but profound reorientation, we can reclaim our human relationship to the earth. The indigenous understanding, and the indigenous understanding not only in North America and South America, but Asia, Europe, Africa, all of these people were within 1,000 years indigenous, right? It's not indigenous that only people live in North America. The indigenous understanding that we belong to the earth leads to a deep appreciation that we stand on the shoulders of all who have gone before, and that our ancestors live in us. Their wisdom informs us, and we can profit from the choices that they made and the work that they did and the knowledge they accumulated, and we can suffer from the mistakes and missteps that they did and learn from them. And every decision we make, we must consider the generations that come after us. We know in our depths, in our mind, in our body, in our spirit that we belong to the earth. We will come to live in awareness of surroundings, of the place that we inhabit. We will live in relationship with what has been and what is to become in every moment of our now. This I believe, our renewed humanity will heal our earth, and our earth will heal our humanity. May it be so. May it be so. Let us join in singing Beauty of the Earth,